Japan Hour, Saturday on CMA. Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. And Zip Air. Summer fares now available.
The emergence of Bongbong Marcos as the leading contender in the Philippine presidential race has raised more questions than answers about the future of Philippines democracy. Will it mark the resurrection and continuation of authoritarian rule and strongman politics? And by the same token, will that also signal the end of liberal democracy in the Philippines? These are questions which Bongbong has failed to address with any certainty.
I would say that because he doesn't engage with us voters, our suspicions, our fears are not dispelled, right? So we cannot be blamed for fearing another dictatorship or another martial law under him, because he's not offering any assurances to us that those things won't happen again. We will have a tendency to think, well, we might have the same kind of administration as Ferdinand Marcos Sr., right? Which is an administration rife with graft and corruption.
For nearly 4 decades, the Philippine government has been trying to trace and recover the $10 billion fortune Bongbong's father was said to have siphoned off from the public purse. The family also has yet to abide by the court's ruling to pay up $6.2 million in unpaid estate taxes and return of the ill-gotten wealth. But the biggest question is, will Bongbong govern the Philippines just like his father did? Should he be elected into office?
Well, to be fair to Bongbong Marcos, it is not yet certain that he will become a dictator like his father, because gone are the days of big dictators suddenly rising to power. So he will be a authoritarian, no? Perhaps he might borrow 1 or 2 plays from his father's playbook. That's why he said he was a Machiavellian, no? Because that is already an indication that he is willing to embrace the political philosophy of his father.
But 39-year-old Marcos loyalist Myra Guzman believes Mr. Marcos will be a better version of his father. Myra lives in Ilocos Norte, the Marcos Belowick. After their exile, Bongbong and his sister Aimee served the province as both governors and legislators. And to Myra, the Marcoses have always been pro-poor.
During his time here as a governor, ma'am, I cannot see anything na nag-grab po siya from my true heart. Kasi sa multi-purpose cooperative po, nagbigay po siya sa mga barangays, pagtulong sa mga peddlers, sa mga mahihirap po na kapwa Ilocano. Nagbigay po siya ng project po. Lalong-lalo na po sa agrikultura, lalong-lalo na po sa irigasyon. Marami po mga bagay na naitulong niya para sa mga mahihirap. At ganun din po sa mga middle class, kung elite man po yan. There is equity, there is equality among Filipino people as well.
But 82-year-old retired prosecutor and former dean Manuel Aurelio disagrees. He feels that although Bongbong Marcos should not be made accountable for all wrongdoings allegedly committed by his father, Ferdinand Marcos, he still has the duty to return the money if it's obtained through illegal means.
But you know, to be fair with Bongbong, castigating him for alleged abuses, I say alleged abuses, of the martial law period is not fair. They were only young people. It is not possible that they sat down to design these alleged abuses. They were too young to do it. Let's be fair also. But if your father, for example, amassed wealth from corruption, now you are the child, you are not going to pay for the crime your father committed, but you have the moral obligation to return it to where they came from. That's the thing. That's the thing. But if you are in denial, how can you return it?
I think perhaps the most scary part is this. It would not be an accountable administration. We know that they have been evading their tax, their real estate tax, for more than 2 decades now, 3 decades perhaps. We know that they have been lying and denying about the atrocities of the martial law and the responsibility of the family. We know that he doesn't show up in debates. We know that he lies through his teeth. What stops him from doing all of that when he is now in power?
It's not fair to prejudge him whether he would indeed be a strongman, authoritarian. He can be himself. He can be quite different from his father. It's really situational.
Whether the next president will be a Democrat who will uphold the independence of the main organs of the state, or an iron-fisted ruler who would control the levers of power, remains uncertain. The only thing that Filipinos long for the most is a better life for themselves, especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. The health crisis has caused massive disruptions to the economy, and that has led to the loss of jobs and decreased incomes for the people.
What happened during the pandemic is a lot of vulnerable people who were not necessarily poor but were on the edge of the poverty line. These were the people who are really affected by this.
The Philippines has been borrowing quite heavily to fund for the infrastructure project as well as the COVID response. The debt to GDP ratio has narrowed down a little bit. In other words, the government would have little money to fulfill its promises. So whoever becomes president would have to deal with this very tight fiscal situation.
Economic observers have been waiting to know about Bongbong's economic plans, but that has not fully come through due to his reluctance to engage in pre-election debates. And that has led to fears, suspicions, and uncertainty about what he intends to do next if he's elected into office.
On his side, I don't think there has been a clear economic agenda on his part. A lot of the things that he supposedly supports don't really have substantial plans. So I cannot speak to the strength of his economic agenda. I don't think there is one. And I think people will see more of the same with the Marcos presidency, that he will probably appoint, again, there's the strong possibility rather that he will appoint people not based on competence or ability, but rather on connections to the family. So cronyism, vested interests again. And I think that does not send a strong signal to potential investors, to consumers, to the Philippine economy as a whole.
In contrast to Bongbong Marcos, Vice President Leni Robredo seems to have provided greater clarity in terms of her economic plans. And that includes, among others, rolling out an anti-poverty program, cracking down on corruption, reducing government red tape, boosting investments, improving the ease of doing business, and beefing up unemployment insurance schemes.
Vice President Robredo also identified the MSMEs, or yung micro, small, medium enterprises, as being core to the economy as well. Again, so these were the businesses that probably had to close down. These were the businesses that had to adapt. These were the businesses that had to start going into e-commerce, that were forced into e-commerce because of the pandemic. Leni's whole campaign platform is more about good governance, clean governance, and competent governance, right? So I think that sends a better signal to investors. That's probably why most economists and people in the business community are leaning towards Vice President Leni Robredo.
And those are among the factors which have prompted people like Keith to shift his loyalty from Bongbong Marcos to Leni Robredo. He has recently joined the Pink Wave and started campaigning online for her.
I would not vote for BBM and Sara Duterte from 2022 moving forward. Now, I would vote for someone na may malinis na track record, may maayos na plataforma, hindi lamang para sa napipili, kundi para sa lahat. Lalo na yung mga kababayan natin na pinakakailangan.
But there are also many Filipinos who place greater priority on safety, peace and order. A legacy of outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte.
Ako, hindi ko bonitohan si Duterte. Pero gusto ko yung style niya. Talagang, of all the president in the world, Duterte is the only one who have the guts to fight against drugs. Ayan ang pinaka-matinding nagawa ni Duterte.
It's just days before polling day, and the top contenders for the presidency are going all out to woo voters to their cause. After 6 years of Duterte's rule, will the people allow for strongman politics to continue and thrive in the country? Or will it give liberal democracy a chance to succeed?
Gusto ko'y demokrasya para malaya ang bawat isa na maidaing ang kanyang nasa loob at mga karaingan. Narito ako ay sang-ayon na maging Pangulo ng ating bayan ay isang babaeng naninindigan, makabayan, makamahirap at ipagtatanggol ang demokrasya.
Pero sa kanya ang demokrasya ay naaayon, nilalagay niya na naaayon sa batas ang kanyang demokrasya. At saka yung kaunting hindi makamay na baka lang ng tawag doon Medyo yung dapat lang na bawal, talagang may implement.
Kung sobrang democratic na bansa natin, para po naman walang makikinig, lahat sila masusunod. Kaya dapat din po kailangan din po yung kamay na bakal. Para sa akin po.
Kailangan ng Pilipino ng Pangulo na may kamay na bakal kasi para matakot ang mga Pilipino gumawa ng masama.
Hindi naman po sa kamay na bakal talagang nasa tama lang po. Hindi naman talagang kamay na bakal yung tawagin nila na masakit naman pakinggan pero yung tama lang ang ginagawa niya.
At tao! Ang bayan! Kay Leni Robredo!
It was ousted in May 2018 after more than 6 decades in power.
We accepted the result and Najib said he has to go.
In the 14th general election, many Malays voted against the government.
4 years on, the tide is changing.
We're seeing a revival, not only of UMNO, but interestingly, a revival of Najib Razak.
Can the momentum be sustained? Changing political fortunes in Malaysia. Insight, Thursday on CNA.
Separated by politics and ideology, recent development has opened up an exciting new world. I'm Lim Yan-suk, CNA Seoul.
The most common heart disease is coronary artery disease, which can cause heart attacks. And there are also diseases involving the heart valves, which can cause heart failure, and also disease affecting the aorta, which is the main blood vessel bringing blood out of the heart. So some genetic conditions like Marfan syndrome can cause a weakening of the aortic wall, and this predisposes patients to dilatation of the aorta, which puts them at risk of aortic dissection or tears or ruptures of the aorta, which can often be fatal. One of the emerging technologies is the personalized external aortic root support or PAIR surgery, whereby we will image the patient's aorta using CT or MRI scans, and then custom-made a 3D printout of the patient's aortic root with a supporting mesh, which we then use to reinforce the aortic root. It is essentially a preemptive surgery whereby we strengthen the patient's aorta to prevent it from dilating any further or from tearing.
One of the conditions of aortic disease is aortic stenosis. It's essentially a degenerative condition whereby the aortic valve deteriorates and becomes sticky, and as a result, the effective area becomes smaller. This can be made worse by other conditions such as hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and smoking cigarettes. TAVI or TAVR is transcatheter aortic valve implantation or replacement. Essentially, this is a procedure where we insert a crimp valve inside one of the vessels of the body and advance the valve into the aortic valve position. And when we deploy this valve, it will push upon the native valve and it will become functional immediately. In 2020, we started to use the MyValve, and the reason why we are using this is that the profile of the tip of the valve is small, so that it's more suited to our small Asian patients. Aortic stenosis is not uncommon among elderly people, so it is the duty for those who are younger to bring their elderly parents and grandparents for regular checkup to rule out aortic stenosis, because this condition can be fatal if untreated.
Prevention is always better than cure. If everyone leads a healthy lifestyle, hopefully you will be free from heart diseases.
The Filipino spirit of Bayanhan never wanes. The Filipino people, resilient, fighting for better lives. Buena Bernal, CNA, Manila.
Radiance of the sun. Strength of the ocean. Hardness of the diamond. Real touch. Only natural diamonds with grading certificate. Perfect match to Mason Jewelry.
This is Singapore Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Dawn Tan. Tonight's top stories. Headwinds on the horizon. Singapore braces for economic repercussions after the US Fed announces its biggest rate hike since 2000. Making outdoor adventure safer. A new set of guidelines in the works to improve the quality and safety of such activities. Taking the reins in tackling climate change, Singapore's Sustainability and Environment Minister says governments need to steer the green transition. Singaporeans are reaping the benefits from their Central Provident Fund contributions. Median monthly payouts increased by 25% from 2019 to 2021. And a 21-year-old victim of an impersonation scam comes forward to share his story. We have a special guest to bring you more details of his experience.
I'm Loquist. Also tonight, Russian troops bear down on the last Ukrainian stronghold in Mariupol, despite a pledge to hold off to allow for evacuation. Plus mudslinging and propaganda in overdrive as campaigning to become the Philippines' next president heads into the final stretch.
I'm Elizabeth Neo with your Asia Business Update. NTU expands a tie-up with German automotive firm Schaeffler to ramp up innovation in robotics and transport. Plus, the strongest sales, ZF Computers and telecommunication equipment pushes Singapore's retail sales up almost 9%.
Homeowners could soon be paying more for their housing loans. Mortgage rates here in Singapore are likely to increase following the US Federal Reserve's biggest rate hike in over 2 decades. At least one bank says that more people are reconsidering their refinancing options. But analysts say that higher interest rates may not necessarily mean more households are over-leveraged. Geraldine Yap with more.
Singapore households can expect to feel the pinch from higher mortgage rates after the US Federal Reserve's half percentage point rate hike, the highest since 2000. Local bank DBS says while it received more customer inquiries about their loan options, it also advises its clients to set aside funds to buffer against interest rate hikes. But one analyst says rising interest rates may not lead to homeowners switching to fixed-rate home loans. That's because fixed loans have already factored in future rate hikes.
Today, the gap between a fixed interest rate and a floating interest rate is as large as 1.2 or 1.3%. People are still choosing to go for SORA peg risk because it gives them a very large buffer. You can have a floating interest rate priced at 1%, for example, versus a fixed interest rate priced at 2.25%, right? So people are taking the risk going for floating interest rates, enjoying that buffer.
And while floating rates are expected to go up, another analyst says the spike will be likely higher for loans pegged to the Singapore Interbank Offer Rate or SIBOR.
Is always based on what the banks forecast. So in this kind of rising interest rate environment, SIBOR will be the first to go up, whereas SORA will react according to what is happening actually in the market.
Both analysts agree households don't have to worry about overextending on their loans. That's because there are several measures to protect borrowers, such as the total debt servicing ratio and mortgage servicing ratio.
The banks also apply a stress test of 3.5% before determining your loan eligibility. So this also means that if interest rates goes up to 3.5%, that you would have the ability to service your loan, right, and not default on the mortgage loan.
But they add, if interest rates continue increasing going into the next year, households with high levels of debt might start to feel the heat.
A national standard for outdoor and adventure education is in the works. Several stakeholders, including the Culture, Community and Youth Ministry, are looking to improve the quality and the safety of such activities in Singapore. Tan Si-hui finds out more.
Whether they're land or sea activities, a new set of guidelines will be developed to help all outdoor learning providers assess risk better when planning and managing events. The recommendations will also ensure that instructors across the board enhance their technical expertise and knowledge in areas like first aid.
Right now, in Singapore, different providers may subscribe to different standards, and we want a nationally recognized set in Singapore so that we can have ease of reference, really. At the end of the day, what we are trying to achieve is for the outdoor adventure education sector to achieve a high level of safety and quality in the programs that we offer to our users in the environment that we operate in.
To get the ball rolling, MCCY, Outward Bound Singapore, and Outdoor Learning and Adventure Education Association have submitted a joint application to the relevant agencies. Once approved, the next step will be to come up with specific guidelines which apply only to outdoor learning for educational purposes. This part of the process is expected to take up to 24 months and will involve the public.
I think once the standard is being developed and agreed and accepted, this is where will be the next level on how do we create a check and balance on companies to ensure that they adhere to the standard that is prescribed by the Singapore standards.
Take challenge ropes course activities, for example. Though it's work in progress, CNA understands the highest level of stringency will apply because of its high-risk nature. This may include quality inspection of equipment such as pulleys, lanyards, and brake systems. Staff may also be required to look out for participants' comfort levels.
This centre here at Boys and Girls Brigade currently follow a range of standards for activities such as kayaking and flying fox. Now this includes National Sports Association standards and international standards. But when the new Singapore standard is created, the centre will follow a guideline that encompasses best practices from both worlds. Let's go! Good work!
Outdoor activities involving high elements are still suspended by the Education Ministry. That's after a 15-year-old student died at Safra Yishun early last year while taking part in a high element course.
Despite global commitments to fight climate change, the world still lacks common standards and regulatory reporting requirements around sustainability to help guide investments. Now, that's the warning from Singapore's Sustainability and Environment Minister, Grace Fu, to global decision makers attending the St. Gallen Symposium in Switzerland.
It's easy for groups to call this greenwashing, but is it fair? Is it a fair judgment? We don't know unless we put all the companies and all the reports together in a very easy way to extract with the use of IT, big data, satellite monitoring to tell us who is doing the right thing and therefore deserve the lower cost of capital and who's not.
Ms. Fu underscored the urgency for the world to get together at the financial level to agree on disclosure reporting standards and verification. She also stressed that sustainability as a sector needs people who can put the impact of green measures into dollars and cents. She also encouraged an open mind on new technologies such as nuclear energy.
Technology on nuclear is moving, and there are more safer options, maybe not immediately, but it is possible. So I think we should always be informed by science and take what is the most pragmatic way.
Singaporeans are getting more from their Central Provident Fund contributions.
I think that the account balance in the CPF longer